What's going on, guys? This is going to be a very important video because as far as I know, there is no reliable resource out there on the internet right now making the distinction between co-brokering and double brokering. And frankly, so I was just a victim of a double brokering experience this week and I handled it. But I see a lot of misconception and misinformation going around from inexperienced brokers and carriers and dispatchers about what double brokering and co-brokering is. So what I want to do is I'm going to make the definitive resource to explain how this stuff works, what each of these things are, and how to protect yourself from them. I'm going to go into that a little bit, how to protect yourself as a carrier, as a broker, who's at risk when you enter a co-brokering transaction, who's at risk during a double brokering transaction, what constitutes double brokering, what constitutes co-brokering, and how are dispatchers breaking the law every single day. I'm not saying every dispatcher breaks the law, but a lot of them are. So let's get right into this. I'm going to break this down into very simple terms. We're going to use flowcharts, diagrams, and I'm going to show you the anatomy of the legal and illegal transactions that happen every single day in the industry. My brokerage, we have plenty of co-brokering agreements with responsible brokers. We do it quite often. Everything is transparent and done with people that we trust under contracts and all that good stuff. So I'm gonna go a little bit into how all of this stuff works. So before we get into the actual transactions, for the sake of simplicity, let's break down the three major players in the industry, right? These are the three guys and girls that make the industry move. Number one, we have brokers. Two, we have carriers. Three, we have dispatchers. All three of these parties are very different in their capabilities as far as the law is concerned, right? So brokers, let's start with them. That's what I am. I'm a broker. There's a lot of brokers watching this right now. A broker has a broker authority. And what that does is it gives you as a company the right to handle somebody else's property with somebody else's assets and get paid for it. Say that again. A broker authority gives you the right to handle somebody else's property with somebody else's assets and charge for it. Now we see this every single day. With every brokerage transaction that we do, we're getting paid by a customer to pick up their cargo and move it in somebody else's equipment. That's the basic essence of a brokerage transaction. Now let's look at carriers on the other hand. A carrier on the other hand has a carrier authority. A carrier has the right to charge money to transport somebody else's property in their own assets, right? Let's say that again. A carrier has the right to transport somebody else's property in their own assets. A carrier cannot hire carrier B to do work that they accepted as carrier A. Okay, that's double brokering. That's what we're going to explain. If a carrier accepts work or a contract from a broker or a customer, they must use their equipment to move it. Otherwise, they're not allowed to bill for the load, right? So you can see already both entities have different rights. And so you can see why it might be common for brokers to say, oh, I want a carrier authority too, or carriers to say, oh, I want a broker authority too. In the real world, if you haven't been around for a while and you have a double authority, you're walking a very thin line. I don't recommend it. If somebody asks me, oh, how do I get a double authority? I don't even answer them. I say shy away from it, focus on one, go all in on that. But that's here nor there. Now let's move on to dispatchers, my favorite of them all. As a dispatcher, you have zero rights. As a dispatcher, you are a representative of the carriers who hire you as a contractor. You enter into agreements with carriers and on their behalf accept orders, route them around, handle their back office for a percentage of their revenue or profit. As a dispatcher, your name cannot show up on any paperwork. As a dispatcher, you cannot bill brokers. You cannot bill customers as JoJo's dispatch service. If you bill a customer as a dispatcher, even if you have an agreement in place with a carrier, you are technically accepting monies for the movement of goods. And that, by definition, classifies you as a broker. Because only a broker is allowed to accept money to transport goods with assets that they do not own. And since as a dispatcher, you do not own the assets, you're not insured, you're not licensed, you're not bonded, anything that you do with your name on it is out of bounds. The correct way to operate the dispatch service is to be contracted under a carrier, and the carrier pays your bill just like they were paying an employee. That's the only way it works. Where dispatchers cross the line is when they start calling shippers as JoJo's dispatch service and saying like, oh, you know, I have all these trucks in the southeast or the southwest, and I'm running, you know, this lane, this corridor all the time. I got plenty of trucks. That's a problem because you're marketing yourself as a freight broker who has access to all of this equipment legally. You don't. You don't own trucks. You're not licensed. You're not bonded. There's no protection for shippers from you. There's no protection from the carriers from you if something gets stuffed up. At the end of the day, the primary purpose of pretty much every single law is to protect the carrier. The carrier must be paid. That's the premise. If you boil down every legal statute, every single CFR line, it all goes towards the carrier must be paid. There's honestly not that much protection for brokers. There are ways to get protection. I share that kind of stuff in my course, but for the sake of this video, we're not going to get into all of that. Okay, so now we identified all three of the players in the broker. And now let's look at what a transaction usually looks like. The anatomy of a transaction. Guys, I apologize for my messy handwriting, but this is the best way that I can teach it. I'm going to narrate this as I go along. Okay, a standard broker transaction. We're going to call this T1. A shipper gives a load to a broker who gives a load to a carrier. Money passes to broker. Broker passes the money to the carrier. And now here's the thing that a lot of people don't understand. Brokers, you have to pay the carrier this little thing right here. This is locked. Draw a little lock there, a little padlock. This is locked. You have to pay that carrier whether your shipper pays you or not. A lot of brokers don't understand that. You like when a carrier calls to collect a bill and you say, oh, I'm just waiting for my customer to call me. That's not a good idea. If the carrier is smart, it's not very hard to collect from you. They're going to hit your bond. They're going to sue you, and it's an unwinnable case for the broker's part, unless the carrier broke some kind of a contract between the two of you. Okay, transaction 2. Let's use a different color here. This is legal, by the way. That's a legal transaction. Let's go to transaction 2. Shipper goes to carrier. Money is from shipper to carrier. That's a standard shipper to carrier transaction. This is legal. Nothing wrong with that. Shipper decided he or she didn't want to go through a broker. No problem. They cut out the middleman. They went right directly to a carrier. There's a legal transaction. This happens every day, millions of times per day. Now let's involve a dispatcher. I'm going to show you the legal way, and then we're going to get into the tricky and illegal stuff, okay? Shipper to carrier. That doesn't change. What changes is after when the money changes hands, the carrier gives a little commission to the dispatcher. Okay? And we're going to get into the illegal part, but this is legal. Shipper, look at the flow of the money. That's the important part. The money flow. The money flows from the shipper to the carrier to the dispatcher. I'm going to show you what's illegal as we go through this video. Right now, all I want you to pay attention to is money flow. Money goes to shipper, money goes to broker, money goes to carrier. T2. Money goes from shipper to carrier. Awesome. This is a legal transaction. Great. All three of these transactions are the most simple transactions that you can handle in freight, you could make millions of dollars executing these transactions at the basic level every single day. You just have to do it over and over and over and over again. So now, how does it get complicated when you mix in other players? So first, let's talk about why would someone co-broker. Let's talk about co-brokering first, and then we're going to talk about double brokering. Co-brokering 101. Here's the basic premise. Shipper has loads, right? They got loads. They got pallets of drums. They have tankers, right? They have all this stuff that they need moved. They got bags. Right, bags on pallets. They have all this stuff that they need to move. So you as a broker, your broker one, happen to call them up. You say, hey, I want to help move all your stuff. And they say, all right, well, we have like about 100 loads a year. You think you can handle that? And you're going to say, yeah, of course I can. I can handle that. So they drop 100 loads on you. They drop 50 loads on you. Even if they drop 10 loads on you in a week, you're just one person here. You as a person, as a single company, can only make so many calls a day. So we're going to, I'm not going to draw 100 trucks. I'm just going to draw a bunch of little people here. Let's say you can make 3 calls a day max. I'm sure you can make more. Right, these are all carriers. He has 50 loads. You cannot cover 50 loads with 3 carriers. But your capacity is 3 carriers. You can't call anymore. You're working as hard as you can. You don't have the staff, you don't have the manpower, and you don't have the financial stability to do it. So, what do? You call your friend, who you know and you trust, B2. And you say, hey friend, I have 50 loads. I can't cover them all myself. Can you give me a hand? They say, yeah, actually we have a lot of, strong relationships in that region. Let me see what we can do. So, they call 3 carriers. Maybe they could call 4. Maybe they could call 10. Right? So now you have a relationship with the shipper. We're going to talk about the money flow in a minute. So now instead of only being able to cover 3 loads, now you can cover 4, right? So we went from 3 loads alone to 7 loads together. Maybe we made a little bit less money because B2 took some money out from us, but we're servicing that customer more. So let's look what the money flow looks like. Here's the money flow. Shipper pays the carrier, pays the broker. I'm gonna go 3. Part of this money goes to the carriers. Part of this money goes to the broker. Part of this money goes in your pocket. Right in the pocket. The second broker. Part of this money goes in the pocket. Part of this money goes to the rest of the carriers. Okay? So everybody is paid, but look at where the money came from. The money came from the shipper. It went to the next broker. And then it went to the third broker. And all of the carriers got paid. They all got paid just fine. Now, What is keeping broker 2, choose a color here. What's keeping broker 2 from stealing this customer and going direct? Well, so there's a barrier. There's this invisible barrier between them. And look how it's separated. Watch this. Here's the barrier. This barrier is a document called a CoBroker agreement. This document acts as a shield protecting your customer from the broker, and it protects the broker's carriers from you. Now, I know this got a little complicated, but look what we got here. We have multiple colors. The shipper entered into a contract with you. You entered into a contract with broker 2. You both work together to pay the carriers. The money flows from the shipper to you, to the other broker, and everything is protected and sealed off by the CoBroker agreement. That is what co-brokering is. Go here. So co-brokering, in its simplest form, shipper to broker to broker to carrier, protected by a co-broker agreement. Co-broker agreement. That is a legal co-brokering transaction. Money, right? So we have money, 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 money. Right? A little money goes down. I'm not saying who gets the most money. I'm just saying that the money trickles down the line. That is co-brokering. That is a legal co-brokering transaction. It's perfectly legal. You could do it as many times as you want. You could do it with 3 brokers. There's some very, very specialized transportation that we do that has had to be brokered up to 3 times because the equipment only exists. That maybe there's only 1 or 2 pieces of this special equipment in the country. And we have a friend who has a friend who has a friend who has a friend who knows the guy who owns the piece of equipment. You have to co-broker 5 times. It doesn't matter. It's legally allowed because remember, what did we talk about up here, right? The broker authority. They're allowed to take anybody's property with consent, charge money to move it with somebody else's assets. That's co-brokering. Now let's talk double brokering. Double brokering. Double brokering is illegal in all forms. I'm gonna put on this red there. Illegal. Now, what is double brokering? Double brokering is when a carrier authority gets a load from a broker and then gives it to another carrier or broker. The money goes broker to carrier, and then it usually gets cut off because it's a scam. That's double brokering. So let's define it again. Let's do it like we did the last time. Shipper, carrier, anyone. A carrier is not allowed to give a load to anybody. Now I hear everybody's saying already, I have a double authority. Okay. I need a whole slide for this one. I have a double authority. It doesn't matter if you have a double authority. Because here's what governs what double brokering and co-brokering is. Double brokering, what governs co/double brokering? Paperwork, paper trail. You have to look at these things. Whose name on the invoices? Whose name on the BOLs? Whose name on the rate confirmations? So, for example, if you have a double authority, so here's a shipper. Here's the shipper, happy shipper. And you call them. Nice blue. You call them. And you say, hey, I have a broker authority and a carrier authority. You say, oh, wow, that's great. You have both. You'll definitely be able to handle my freight for cheap. You say, yeah, I absolutely can. I'll tell you what. Do you want me to take an order? Do you have an order? And they'll say, yeah, I have an order going from New Jersey to California. And you say, oh, that's great. Yeah, and they'll say, okay, yeah, so I'll give it to you. They give it to your carrier authority. But here's the problem. Your truck is broken down. No truck available. So you say, no problem. I'm going to give this to my broker authority. And then I'm going to give this to another carrier. Other carrier. Illegal. You cannot do that. That's double brokering. Because they didn't give the load to the broker authority. They gave the load to the carrier authority. If the carrier authority receives the load, they cannot give it to the broker authority. If the broker authority received the load, right? If the shipper gave the load to the broker, then the broker can give the load to this guy or to this guy, and that's legal. I hope that makes sense. So it's all about whose name is on the paperwork. If the broker's name is on the paperwork, the broker can tender the load to another carrier. If the carrier's name is on the paperwork, they cannot tender the load to anybody but themselves. Even if they own both entities, it doesn't matter. It's what's on the paperwork. Where's the money being exchanged? Because if you get audited, well, I don't even think they do audits. But if you get investigated by the FMCSA, they're going to look at the paper trail. Whose name is on this rate con? Whose name is on this BOL? Whose name is on this invoice? Whoever's getting paid, wherever the money's going, that's what makes it an illegal or double brokering or co-brokering transaction. You should understand the difference by now. Co-brokering. A shipper gives a load to a broker, who gives the load to a broker, who gives the load to a carrier. It's protected by the co-broker agreement. Legal. Double brokering. Illegal. A broker gives the load to a carrier who gives the load to another carrier or broker. Cannot do that. That's illegal. What governs co-brokering, double brokering? How do you decide if this is legal or illegal? Whose name is on the paperwork? These documents. Where's the money going? Always remember that. Where's the money? That's a question mark. Where's the money going? That's how you find out. So if you don't know what's going on, you ask yourself, where's the money going? If the money's going to you and you're a carrier, that money should not leave your possession unless you're paying a dispatcher a commission. If the money is going to you and you're a broker, you can give the load to another broker. You can give it to another carrier. So let's talk about the problems. Like, where can this stuff go wrong? Because this, you say, Lewis, this is great and all. Co-brokering looks really cool. Who's at risk during co-brokering transaction? Why do you have to vet your co-broker so much? Why do you have all these documents in place? What goes into this stuff? Let me explain that. Make that red. Red for risks. Risks of co-brokering. And then we're going to talk about the carrier and double brokering. Risks of co-brokering. This is the number one risk, and it's going to have to do with money. So we have shipper, broker on one half. On the other half, we have broker 2, carrier. Now let's look at these as two halves of transaction. Because who has the contracts? There's a contract with the shipper and broker, right? There's a contract with the broker and the broker. And there's a contract with the broker and the carrier. What's that mean? Money. Money goes from here to here, here to here, here to here, right? That's what the money looks like. The biggest risk of co-brokering, one of these entities is at more risk than the other. Let's see if you could figure out who. I'm going to give you the answer anyway. This, I think I just ruined my pen here. This is the most dangerous transaction. Why is that? Because carriers are protected at all costs by the law. Carrier has collection power. The carrier has the collection power, not you as a broker. Brokers aren't really protected by the law payment-wise. We could protect ourselves with contracts and stuff, but the UCC, the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations, protects the carriers. They're protected by the CFR. What does that mean? That means that if this broker here, this one, if he doesn't pay you, there's nothing you can do. For the most part, there's nothing you can do. But no matter what this guy does, broker 2 must pay carrier. They must pay the carrier, no matter what. So this guy is getting paid. This guy might get paid and stiff you. This guy might not get paid at all. This guy might not pay anybody. But the carrier gets paid, right? They have to. They're protected by everything. And if they can't collect from you as a broker 2, they can go collect from broker 1, and they could collect from the shipper. They could collect from somebody. They could even go after the consignee, depending on what the BOL says. That's why people have a bad idea about co-brokering, because so many people in this position here, this is like the stiff position. Broker 2 is like, that's the worst position to be in, because you have no guarantee of payment from the shipper or broker. You can have all the contracts you want, but suing a broker, you can't get blood out of a rock. So if broker 1 goes out of business, which has happened to me before, you're not going to get paid. So be very careful when you take loads from other brokers to broker it off. As a matter of fact, you should try to never put yourself in the position to be broker 2. Broker 1 is always the best position to be in a co-brokering arrangement, unless you have a lot of legal protection, which not a lot of people do. So now let's look at a double brokering. Let's see what the risks are there. As far as what happens. Double broker. Let's copy this here. Shipper, broker. There's just one example of a double brokering transaction. Carrier, anyone else. Here's the problem here. Let's look at the contracts. Shipper has a contract with the broker. Broker has a contract with the carrier. And the carrier has a contract too, right? With this guy? Only problem is, this is not legal. So that doesn't hold up in court. So, who's liable here? Here's what usually happens. The money goes from the shipper to the broker to the carrier, and the carrier runs to the bank. Be like my little runs to the bank. And then here's what happens. This carrier that did the load comes out, lawsuit, lawsuit. That's what happens. So who gets away scot-free? This guy. This guy is protected for the illegal scamming that they did. They get to go away. They get to go home. They take your money, and there's nothing you can do about it because the law is so confusing. There's civil parts of the law, corporate parts of the law, there's federal, all these different legal loopholes and avenues, and it's very hard to get any kind of convictions or to catch these people because it's so easy to make a cell phone nowadays. So that is double brokering. That is the difference between double brokering and co-brokering. I don't even want to get into dispatching, throwing a dispatcher in there, because so many things of what the dispatcher does is illegal. Here's what's illegal about dispatching when it's done wrong. Dispatching done right is perfectly legal, but let's talk about illegal dispatching, because I'm really getting frustrated dealing with a lot of dispatchers. A carrier needs help. Help. So a dispatcher comes along. Dispatcher comes along with their headset, right? I got a headset on. Say, dispatcher. Dispatcher says, I'm going to help you. I'm going to fill trucks. Fill truck. Get customer. Billing. Carrier says, great. Let's enter into an agreement. Right? then carrier 2 comes along. C1, C2. They say, help, I can't manage my stuff. Dispatcher comes along and says, I can fill your truck, get customers, do your billing. They say, oh, great. Let's get into an agreement. So then the dispatcher, the illegal dispatcher, not talking about the properly done, has agreement with these two people, 1099s. Some 99 agreements with the carriers. But the dispatcher starts calling all these shippers and brokers. Here's shipper 1, shipper 2, broker 1, shipper 3, shipper 4. And the dispatcher says, I have all these trucks. I have all these trucks here and I can help you cover all of your loads. And the trucks love it, right? This guy's happy. This guy's happy. This guy's happy. But here's the problem. No bond. No insurance. No authority. So, where it becomes illegal is when the dispatcher's name, BOL, dispatch, ship, consignee. Your name cannot show up anywhere. RC. RC, the rate confirmation is the dispatch name, broker, shipper, consignee, illegal. Invoice, dispatch, shipper, consignee, whatever it is, illegal. You cannot have the dispatcher. Dispatchers cannot bill for freight. Cannot happen. It's illegal. And the FMC right now is weighing litigation right now and trying to decide if dispatchers can even represent more than one carrier, because they're doing so much work that can misconstrue them as brokers without any of the protection that brokers have to have in place. So I'll provide updates as I read more about the laws and what's passing and what's not. And I even have an idea of how I would get around that if I were a dispatcher, but I'm not going to share that yet. So how the transaction should look like is this. And I went over this before already, but this is how it has to look. It has to look like from a broker to carrier. This is how it looks like. Shipper to a broker to carrier pays a dispatcher. These are the names that go on the paperwork. Here's a shipper to carrier. Shipper, carrier, dispatcher. That's how that works. If you want to get dispatchers involved, the carrier, this is the important part. Cannot do this. Nope. Cannot do this. Illegal. Okay? So let's talk a little bit about how to protect yourself. How to protect yourself. Now, I'll be honest, I can go for days about how to protect yourself. I cover most of it in my course. If you want to protect yourself indefinitely from co-brokering, you should join the program. I fight this stuff all day. Mentor.com/FBA. It's the most advanced program out there. But if you don't want to join, I'll still give you some tips here. As a broker, to protect yourself from co-brokering. 1. Co-broker contract. 2. Do not put yourself as the second broker. What that means is don't accept loads from brokers. Okay? Number 3, make sure rate cons match with the door at the shipper. What does this mean? I'll tell you what it means in a second. If we have a door here, I don't know how this is going to look. This is a truck's door, right? Every single door has to have what's called a door sign. You've probably seen it if you're driving on the highway. It has the name. Sometimes it has the contact info, but most importantly, it has the MC number. Verify the door signs. If you ever think something is fishy, all you have to do is verify the door sign with the shipper. Make sure this matches the name, MC, match the rate con. That's how you tell if you're getting scammed. Sometimes, to be honest, it's too late, but if you can catch it and you have this like feeling inside that the dispatcher on the phone maybe didn't sound credible, or you ran a credit check and something just doesn't add up, just give the shipper a call and say, hey, can you do me a favor when the carrier gets in there, can you read off the door sign and can you just make sure that it says Landstar or whatever it is, Total Quality or Jimmy's Trucking, whatever that's going to be, okay? So that's 3 ways that brokers can protect themselves from co-brokering and double brokering without their knowledge. 1, always have a co-broker contract. Number 2, just don't put yourself in the position. Don't accept loads from brokers that you don't trust. Make sure you have a payment history with them. Number 3, make sure the rate confirmations match with the door at the shipper. All right. In general, if you're doing a first-time transaction with any broker, you should get payment up front. And that's going to be number 4. Payment up front. That's the easiest way to protect yourself in this industry at all. Payment up front. Okay. Now, I'm not even going to talk about dispatchers because guys got me heated now. Carriers. How do you protect yourself? Well, you're already protected by the law. A lot of carriers, honestly, are a little bit ignorant about the powers that they have and the resources that are available to them to combat double brokering and co-brokering without their knowledge. At the end of the day, remember I said all of the litigation, all of the CFRs, all of the laws are there to put protection on the carriers. The carrier must get paid. That's our motto at our brokerage. The carrier must get paid. Even if we don't get paid, we will always pay the carrier. We will take the hit before we're going to screw a carrier. And you have to have that attitude too. That's essential. That's the only way this industry is going to be able to move forward. It's the only way that you're going to be able to build relationships with carriers is by not screwing them. So how does a carrier protect themselves? 1, payment up front. It's the best up front or before delivery. That's the best. Number 2, carrier contracts. Right, the carrier package and the rate confirmation. 3, if those don't work, bond filing. You can file against a broker's bond. It's very easy. I'll make a video on how to do that for carriers, but if you don't know how to do it, you should look into it. That's something you need to learn how to do. Number 4, still can't get paid. Collections agency. Collections agencies, basically what they do is that they go and they know the laws of bills of lading. They know the laws of collecting for carriers. They make it very easy for you to just, you give them your bill, you give them the contracts that you had in place. They'll go through every legal avenue to get you paid, and they just take a little bit of a commission off the top. So if you don't have a full-time in-house collections department, collections agency is definitely the way to go. Again, this whole thing, I know this was a little bit advanced. We covered a lot here. Maybe I'll make this little diagram here available to you guys. If you want it, I can absolutely save it. Hopefully I shed some light and clarity to what double brokering and co-brokering is. This is the best way I know how. This diagram here, just you being able to see the flow of information. And remember, what this all comes down to is where's the money going? If you're ever questioning whether the transaction is double brokering or co-brokering, I can almost guarantee you if you look at where the money's going, that's what's going to determine that. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions about this stuff, if this helped you, make sure you like it, leave a comment down below. I'll talk to you guys soon.